Am I the only one that didn't know the first Far Cry game just completely jumps the shark like 4 hours in? Just me? Alright, I guess so. 2004's Far Cry 1 is about playing a super badass named Jack Carver who goes on an island-hopping adventure to save a kidnapped journalist and kill every mercenary that you come across. Or at least that's what I thought it was based on my first impressions and previous knowledge of the series. In fact, Far Cry 1 is actually about playing a super badass named Jack Carver who goes on an island-hopping adventure to save a kidnapped journalist, kill every mercenary that you come across, and hunt down a species of human-ape hybrids that have been biologically infused with the DNA of a corrupt CEO who runs a genetic modification company. Okay, this isn't some weird late-game final twist or anything either. Despite the fact that these super primates don't really appear anywhere in the game's marketing, they make up a large majority of the experience once you hit that 3 to 4 hour mark, which was in contrast with what I thought this game was going to be like. Clearly, Far Cry 1's premise was not at all what I was expecting, and those differences in expectations versus the actual experience go beyond just my preconceived notions about the game's story, but also my disappointment with the game in general. Let's talk about why. The first half hour I spent with Far Cry is the most fun I had with Far Cry. It's intoxicatingly charming at first glance. Stepping out of the tutorial bunker and into the wide open jungle for the first time is magical. Hopping into different land and sea-based vehicles to mow down enemies is great fun, and I was stoked when I first got to fly around on a hang glider. I was having a blast scoping out enemy camps and determining how I was going to deal with them, and I could attack their stronghold from any angle due to the openness of the game's levels. Or at least that's how it felt at first. It's kind of a strange feeling. Far Cry's levels are mostly open, but the level design is constricted and small. There's usually a single critical path that is intended to be followed. Along that critical path lie dozens of enemies to kill, and killing enemies is usually unavoidable due to them dropping items that allow you to progress to the next room on your quest. Traveling off onto the roads less traveled feels kinda pointless. Occasionally you'll find the odd enemy camp to kill, but almost never will you find anything interesting to intrigue you, nor will you find any super cool weapons to aid you in your journey. The most common sight is a hill too steep for you to climb and cutting off your wanderlust altogether. This then begs the question, why does Far Cry have all of this open space if there's basically nothing to do in any of it? A little bit of Google searching revealed exactly why. This line here on Wikipedia made a whole lot of sense, and helped explain a lot of the weirdness I felt while playing. Far Cry started out as a tech demo to showcase some NVIDIA tech, as well as the Cry engine. That's right, the Cry engine, the engine most commonly associated with 2007's Crysis, and its sometimes infamous developer, Crytek. Crytek themselves were at the development helm here with Far Cry as well, with Ubisoft only sitting in a publishing role. In many ways, this title kind of feels more like a predecessor to Crysis than it does later Far Cry games. Big yet mostly empty open worlds with a heavy emphasis on being a tech showcase more than an actual game are two major things that both of these first entries demonstrate. But our game here lacks awesome nanosuit powers that encourage any meaningful experimentation. And that's really the biggest dent in this experience. The open world here feels like a big missed opportunity rather than it does a huge glaring flaw, because the real zinger here is that you never feel like you have any fun options to beat the game's soul-crushingly hard AI. Death is a constant in Far Cry, and it's not because you'll feel outplayed, but instead because the enemies seem to zero in on you from ridiculous ranges and you won't have the tools to handle it. The second you start shooting at any foe, it's almost as if a siren goes off and all enemies within a 1 mile radius will triangulate your location and come snipe you down with near 100% accuracy. The description I'm giving is of the easy mode of the game too. I can only imagine what this feels like when those same bullets do more damage. To make matters worse, it feels like shooting at foes is the only real option that you have. The only melee capabilities in the game are if you come across the relatively uncommon machete weapon to equip. Without it, your only way to kill is to shoot, and shooting turns you into a walking target like mentioned before. It's weird how much emphasis this game puts on stealth adjacent mechanics yet has essentially no stealth. You have binoculars to mark enemies from a distance and scope out different camps. Your radar has an indicator to show you how visible you are to enemies, as well as the noise that you're outputting. And you also have an unlimited amount of rocks to throw and strategically draw enemies' attention to a different area. And now that you have all these tools to mark enemies and draw them in, how exactly are you supposed to kill them? Without any melee stealth kills, you're forced to shoot them in the head and attract the entire level, rendering the whole sneaky stealth thing kinda moot. The silenced MP5 is going to become your best friend as it's the only silent weapon in the whole game. But this silence is only going to go so far with the Bloodhound AI, whose dense placement makes it that you're always going to be forced to fight multiple. Despite the issues I had with some of the gameplay here, there are some glimmers of fun to be had, especially if you give it the benefit of the doubt for its age. I definitely had some moments of extreme killing sprees where I felt like the damsel-saving ultra badass that shows up in the cutscenes, but those moments only came after endlessly dying and respawning at checkpoints over and over until I basically memorized every enemy's location by heart. Your enjoyment of this game will likely depend on how much patience you have with the game's ludicrously insane AI. If AI isn't much of a big deal for you and you want this extreme old school challenge, then by all means, have at it. It's just not for me. I feel like I'm about to wrap up this review without having spent a whole lot of time talking about a lot of aspects of it, but the weird issues I had with its gameplay basically clouded up my ability to see anything else. The cliche He-Man protagonist gets super fed up with the whole thing about halfway through, and I can't say that he's alone on that one. Right around the time I really wanted it to be over was around the same time those genetic mutations started carrying guns themselves. The only thing worse than having to deal with a superhuman AI is when that AI is piloting literal superhumans who soak bullets like it's their job. These genetic monstrosities, known as the Trigen, get unleashed by the hundreds during a pivotal moment in the game's plot, leading to them being everywhere. Their escape from captivity leads to a three-way battle between the Trigen, the mercenaries who can't control them, and the player character. But despite the fact that you're only one man, the large-scale battles between these forces seem to have your opponents heavily favor burying their bullets into your flesh rather than their other adversaries. Maybe it's because Jack won't ditch the bright red shirt. My most successful skirmishes against the Trigen usually involved them getting clipped on the terrain, or having their AI bug out and just stare at me so I could get some free hits in, and that's not really a good look. Though there's some moments to be had here if you look past its faults, Far Cry's roots as a tech demo are plain as day. The game lacks any real gameplay or story hook to make it interesting for the lengthy 20 missions it tries to pull you through. Far Cry's biggest problem is that it feels like it prioritized graphics and tech over gameplay in an attempt to win potential developers over on the engine more than it did to win players over on the game. It never feels like more than the sum of its parts, and now that those parts are coming on 15 years old, it's hard to find a reason to revisit this one.